4.2 out of 5. The Last of Us and Game of Thrones both had zombie-like monsters, but The Last of Us made it a point to use its zombies sparingly. More generally, cool action stuff, like in a sci-fi thing it would be Aliens, or Star Wars can't have a Jedi versus Sith battle literally every 5 minutes. It dilutes the impact, and is usually spectacle trying to deflect from lack of story. The Last of Us has the infected, and they're alive, but they're fungus zombies, but they're living creatures, while Game of Thrones has the Wights, W-I-G-H-T-S, of the White Walkers. I forget sometimes that in audio those are homonyms, but the white zombies in Game of Thrones are reanimated dead corpses, not quite actual zombies, because if one bites you, you don't turn into a wight. Though their masters, who are these ice demons, can reanimate the corpses of those they kill, so they still grow their numbers exponentially. And on top of that, the TV show didn't stress this enough, Wights are a lot tougher than regular zombies. That their limbs can keep moving independently of their bodies. This is Evil Dead rules. That if you cut one's arm off, the arm will keep crawling after you, trying to strangle you. That you have to hack them to pieces or burn them. Whereas the infected in The Last of Us are alive. But, okay, there are parallels here, that there are zombie-like creatures in both. And The Last of Us creators in interviews specifically said that in adapting it to a TV show, they took out most of the infected encounters that you would have in a video game. Obviously, the source material is also different, that in a video game you're going to be running into enemies a lot more. Because they said it would get repetitive in a TV format and dilute their presence. Now, out of a 9-episode season, they do have one huge battle with a horde of infected in episode 5, and this is the big battle scene, action scene of the season. It is the showcase, but therefore it's also the exception. That you don't have something on that scale literally every episode, and the episode 5 battle is the one time they introduced only one bloater. That is the only time you saw one of these boss-level enemies. And there was only one of them, not like half a dozen. If you haven't seen that, the infection, the parasitic fungal infection goes through stages. Stage 1, which lasts a couple of days, a couple of months, are the runners, who you see in flashbacks. And then clickers are stage 3, that they're stronger, that the infection's gotten so progressed that the fungus has burst through their skulls, so they're blind and have to use echolocation, but they're a lot stronger. The clickers are stage 3. Bloaters are stage 4, the final stage. That they're people who've been infected for a decade or more, and they're so strong, and the fungus has covered them so much like armor, that they have these fungal armor plates that they can just shrug off gunfire. In the episode, you see someone emptying an M16 at him, and it just literally, the bullets bounce off of his armor. They didn't just have large groups of boss-level bloaters running around. In fact, you actually don't see them that much across the whole season. That they establish the initial infection in episode 1. They don't look messed up with fungal growths yet. The runners are actually pretty easy to do. Then they have a big introduction of this is what clickers are like in the present day in the second episode. Episodes 3 and 4 don't really have major fights with the infected. They're not really the focus. Then episode 5 is the big battle. But after that, through episode 9, the infected only make 1 or 2 noticeable appearances. Really notable things that are, because they're plot relevant, like the flashback to when Ellie was bitten but survived, a flashback to when her mother was bitten. They use them sparingly, and the real problem are the human enemies, even in the game. It's really the humans, because they can think, they use counter-strategies, all of that. In contrast, Game of Thrones overused the white zombies by Season 5, and if you listen to the Blu-ray commentary for Season 8. Even director Miguel Sapochnik admits as much, that we overused them. He said that everything they could do with the whites, they basically already did in Season 5's Hardhome. Just throw in everything in the kitchen sink into this Season 5 battle, and that then there was nothing left to do for the actual finale in Season 8. I mean, he admits as much, and it's stunning that he is lamenting that he admits we were struggling to think of new things to do with them, because we had used up all of our tricks. We just threw everything at the screen. That's the key point here. Hardhome wasn't a masterpiece of filmmaking, it was a cheat. I mean, I praised the stunt work and stuff, but it was not a masterpiece, it was a cheat. They knew Season 5 was rushed, they weren't even trying hard, and their active plan was, we'll just throw in a big-scale battle, and hopefully the empty spectacle will gloss over that for a general audience. This is a strategy they've actually tried to use more than once. Also in Hibbard's book, he revealed that they told him as early as Season 3, we are not trying to go the 10 seasons this deserves, we are planning on actively concealing from HBO that we intend to stop with Season 6, then make a pair of movies to segue into launching a movie career. And apart from that this is lying to and strong-arming HBO and it didn't work, they said word for word in Hibbard's book, the hope is it has such a big movie budget with so much action spectacle that it'll gloss over any loose ends from the story we rushed through. So this is something they are actively trying to implement more than once. Have a big spectacle that'll gloss over our writing failures. And what's sad is, how are you complaining about, Season 8 or even Season 7 battles that don't make sense when this started with Hardhome? And, of course, you have to remember that I talk about this more in other videos. The version of Hardhome and the Battle of the Bastards that you saw in Seasons 5 and 6 are what Sapochnik had to rewrite them into. That he has described in some detail how the things they wanted to put on screen were unfilmable. Not just large scale, I mean, they were awful. Battle of the Bastards was supposed to be just 20 minutes of following Kit Harington around in a melee pile, which is boring after a while, that you guys have no idea how to choreograph a battle scene, or an action scene with mounting tension. Or even compared to, the mounting tension of the Episode 5 battle in The Last of Us, where there's more and more of them coming, the soldiers are getting overwhelmed, she's trying to escape, and from a distance he's picking off the ones chasing her with a rifle, sniping them. That there's choreography to that, and just they didn't do that at all. Sapochnik had to invent better stunt work than they thought of. Better fight choreographing the geography of the battle. And people go, oh, it's this brilliant thing. Even Battle of the Bastards is not a good episode. It is filled with plot holes. And it isn't even filmed that well, because again, they meddle with Sapochnik, even though he kept telling them, I know how to do this better than you do. They would overrule him. That they just wanted this big spectacle, and it isn't even that good of a spectacle, but going on there, Sapochnik himself lamented in the Season 8 Blu-ray, we used up everything we could have used in the finale, we used up all of our ideas ahead of time, we squandered them on Hardhome. And the bizarre thing is, I've actually seen articles about Season 5 basically in shock, genuine shock to the point that you are making rationalizations, rather in denial, when you're shocked and in denial that the best show ever could get this bad, and they were preying on that sunk cost fallacy. They knew that would happen. They knew people would start compartmentalizing rather than admit this was an awful season. I saw articles from news sites I trusted after Season 5 desperately trying to cling to, the title of the article was, well, if there was at least one good thing about Season 5, it's that they handled the White Walkers and zombies better than the books did. And no, that isn't handling them better, it just skipped ahead to giant action stuff that should have been saved for the final battle in the last season. That isn't demonstrating a skill or handling it better from a storytelling perspective. Skipping ahead to the good stuff because you're impatient. Actual articles titled, "It Handles Them Better." In the books so far, there's 5 books, the White Walkers have directly appeared on screen twice. Once in the prologue, and once when Sam kills one with the obsidian dagger, the dragon glass dagger. We've seen the zombies a little more than that. It's not that Hard Home was a thing that happens in the books that they did better, like in parallel. In fact, there's a battle that they describe retroactively, the Battle of the Fist of the First Men, where they're like saying, and the whites were coming, and they even had undead animals. There was an undead polar bear that decapitated one of their officers with a swipe of its paw. Arguably, that was just as good. It's, you invented a battle that doesn't take place in the books at all. They're not even the same. Oh, it handled it better. Meaning what? It's not the same scene done differently. You invented a large-scale, empty spectacle battle, and then said, look at how much better they're handling it. When internally, it's just unloading everything early, that they played their trump card early, and that no one is willing to look at the show as a whole in retrospect. It's all just compartmentalizing to say how good it was. That, in retrospect, we overused think back to how big the White Walker hype was from the end of Season 5 through Season 7, and just how much they overhyped them and overused them, to the point that the director himself, their biggest director, said we ran out of ideas for them by the final season, what should have been the big climax, because we didn't save anything. I mean, what is the main rule of horror movies? Never show the whole monster until the final scene. You never get a full look at the shark in Jaws until relatively late. And the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones, when they were pretty much following how the books handled them, that you see them you see them out in the darkness vaguely, like Season 2, when Jon is at Craster's Keep, he just sees a figure in shadow picking up a baby, and you see the aftermath of their kills and their presence. Basic rule of horror things, like Ridley Scott's Alien and stuff, you see the whole thing only at the end. Imagine if, like Ridley Scott's Alien, you had a really good look at the alien, like, when it kills Brett halfway through the movie, in its adult form. The way Scott filmed it, it's all these quick POV shots that you don't see the whole alien, even in that scene, even though the characters in the scene, who came in just as it was running away, got a really good look at it. The camera doesn't show that. This is one of the most basic rules of horror, that you're supposed to tease it out. And that Sapochnik himself lamented we overused them and ran out of ideas, versus The Last of Us has interviews where they have to explain we chose not to use them even as much as the source material did, because admittedly, the source material is a video game. And they said that doesn't translate well on screen. You can't just have them shooting these things all the time. It makes them less scary. And we have to save a big attack by half a dozen bloaters for next season. I don't think, Stage 5 is sometimes they merge together into a clump of them. It's called a Rat King. It's this big thing from the second game where there's a Rat King that's basically like a dozen of these things merged together the way mushrooms sometimes merge together. Like, if Benioff and Weiss were doing this, we'd have half a dozen Rat Kings by the end of Season 1. Versus you're going to have one as a big standout moment in what I assume is Season 3 of The Last of Us, as this one-shot super boss. That's it, that there was one bloater, and it impressed everyone, and just how they showed this one thing is really dangerous. It can grab a man by his throat and toss him around like a rag doll. It can take a full clip from an M16 and just bounces off of it. It was scary. Versus if you overuse, and you can actually see the monsters pretty well. It's not even like Alien where, we see it in glimpses. You can see the infected pretty clearly when they're walking around because they're blind using echolocation. But they're not in that many scenes, and they're always dangerous. It's always an effort to kill them. Makes it scarier that they didn't overuse the monsters. You save that. This could be said of any action scene, even humans fighting humans. After a while, you keep You need to think of ways to keep the battles original. If you rely on only spectacle, the spectacle gets boring if you overuse it, and it gets repetitive.